Today's headline is a great Choctaw chief. The subheadline says, Peter P. Pitchlynn, the greatest leader his tribe ever had. This article was a special correspondence written from Kansas City on December 17th. It says, some time ago I made a fortnight's visit to Tom Pitchlynn's ranch near Caddo in the Choctaw Nation. He is the youngest son of Peter P. Pitchlynn, one of the celebrated chiefs of the tribe. I knew him intimately, and Tom, whose father introduced me to him many years ago, has been a warm friend for more than a decade. His ranch, comprising some 2,000 acres, is located on the Blue River in the midst of a gracefully undulating prairie, continually beautified by copses and groves of timber, around the trunks of which, literally involving them, are vines producing the greatest profusion of delicious grapes, and hanging in such endless clusters as justly to entitle this singularly charming pastoral country to the style of a vineyard for many miles together. Peter P. Pitchlynn, whose Indian name was the Snapping Turtle, the greatest chief or governor the Choctaws ever had, was a remarkable man. He was born in Hushuqua, now part of Noxubee County, Mississippi, in 1806, and died in Washington, D.C. in January of 1881. His father was a white man bearing General Washington's commission as an interpreter, and his mother a full-blooded Choctaw. He was brought up like the average Indian boy of his tribe in those days, but manifesting a desire to be educated, he was sent 200 miles to school in Tennessee. At the end of the first quarter, he returned home to find his people engaged in negotiating a treaty with the general government. As he considered the terms of the instrument a fraud upon his tribe, he refused to shake hands with General Jackson, who had the matter in charge on behalf of the United States. He afterwards attended the Columbia, Tennessee Academy and was ultimately graduated at the University in Nashville. Although he never changed his opinion regarding the treaty, he became a strong friend of General Jackson. After graduation, he returned to Mississippi, became a farmer, and married, being the first Choctaw to depart from the practice of polygamy. In 1828, he was appointed leader of an Indian delegation sent out by the United States into the Osage country on a peacemaking and exploring expedition, preparatory to the removal of the Choctaws, Chickasaws, and Creeks beyond the Mississippi. 6 months were occupied in the journey, and the negotiations were in every way successful, Pitchlynn displaying no little diplomatic skill and courage, although only 22 years old. He emigrated from the old home to the new reservation with his tribe and built a cabin on the Arkansas River. He was a great admirer of Henry Clay, whom he met for the first time in 1840. It was on a steamboat on the Ohio. He noticed two men in the cabin earnestly engaged in conversation, to which he was an attentive listener. During the course of their remarks, he turned to his traveling companion and in a whisper said, if that old farmer with an ugly face had only been educated for the law, he would have made one of the greatest men in the country. He soon learned that the old farmer with the ugly face was Henry Clay. It was this celebrated Choctaw chief whom he met on his trip by steamer on the Ohio, en route from Cincinnati to Louisville, that Charles Dickens described in his American Notes. Governor Pitchlynn was the first of his nation to discard metaphorically the breechclout, and the first to recommend the abandonment of polygamy. He never accepted it, but discountenanced the practice of it at the beginning of his eventful and noble career. At the breaking out of the Civil War in 1861, he was in Washington attending the public business for his tribe, and assured Mr. Lincoln that he hoped to keep his people neutral, but he could not prevent three of his children and many others from joining the Confederacy. He himself remained a firm Union man all through the war, notwithstanding the fact that the Confederates raided his magnificent ranch and captured all of his immense herds of cattle, while the Emancipation Proclamation freed 100 of his slaves. He was a wonderful orator, as a perusal of his many speeches will confirm, a genuine Christian, and a perfect gentleman. He was buried with Masonic honors in the Congressional Cemetery at Washington, D.C., and Albert Pike the poet delivered a eulogy over him, and his memory is deeply venerated wherever the Choctaw language is spoken, and by everyone who ever had the pleasure of the acquaintance of such a noble man. He was thoroughly versed in all the lore, superstitions, and curious traditions of the tribe, and to hear him talk on these strange subjects was a literary and archaeological treat. He many years ago gave me much information regarding his primitive people, their supposed origin, and the tradition of their migration to the region of the Mississippi. It appears that the Choctaws, Chickasaws, Creeks, and Seminoles were at some remote period of antiquity all one nation, and that through some internal struggle they dissolved their tribal relations. The word Choctaw is supposed to mean a separation, though its original definition is lost. Chickasaw means rebellion, and the proper name of the Creeks, as they are called in their own language, is Muskogee. When first known to the whites, they lived in the country between the breakwaters of the Alabama and Savannah rivers, and as this was full of small streams and creeks, they were called Creek Indians. Those occupying Florida were called Seminoles, a corruption of Istasimol, wild men or runaways translated properly. The story of their migration he related to me as follows. The separation or dispersion of our people into several distinct tribes must have occurred at some point of remote antiquity, when they lived far in the southwest, probably lower Mexico or the border of Central America, for my tribe came to the Mississippi region as Choctaws. Their country was far beyond the mountains of snow, and they were several years making the long journey to the coast of the great river, the Mississippi. A great prophet, a medicine man, was their leader. He walked in advance of the whole tribe and carried a red pole which he struck in the ground where they camped every night, and every morning the pole invariably pointed to the east. He told them they must continue to travel in that direction until a place was reached where it stood erect, and that would be their permanent dwelling place, for so the Great Spirit had instructed. After a while, they arrived at the Mississippi, which they called Age Beyond, and when the mouth of the Yazoo was reached, the pole stood straight, which is now the exact center of the Choctaw Nation. At that point, I believe there still exists a great artificial hill, determined by archaeologists to be of prehistoric origin and belonging to the same system as those mounds found elsewhere in the Mississippi. But all the Choctaws I have met, intelligent old men, when asked about it, claim that their ancestors built it to commemorate their arrival at the spot where the pole stood up, and they called it Leaning Over Mound or Sloping Mound. This article was written by Henry Inman. This story came from the great state of Indiana, being reported in the New Albany Ledger of December 23rd, 1889. Thank you for joining us today. If you want to continue to uncover all of America's lost and forgotten history, then remember before you leave to hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, and remember to like and comment below. And we'll see you next time on Americana Archives.